Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Shadow Self, A Journey Within. My co-host Joanne Bessesi and I are excited about our next guest. But first, I want to say hello to Joanne. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Todd. How are you tonight? I'm really excited about our guest. Fantastic gentleman and speaker.
Yes, I'm very excited as well. I'm doing pretty well tonight. I'm very excited about this episode. So I'm going to introduce our next guest. Our next guest is David Bennett. Hey, David, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Well, thank you for joining us. We're very honored you're spending some time with us tonight. So, David, could you give the listeners a little bit about your background and what you do?
Well, I'm a certified transformational life coach, and also I have my own form of energetic healing that I kind of developed after my near death experience, and it helped me to overcome stage 4 lung and bone cancer. And that set me on a whole nother path. I allow spirit to kind of guide me on a day-to-day basis, and I let my life unfold from there.
Wow, that sounds really interesting, and I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit more about that this evening. So I'm going to let Joanne take from here.
Hi, David, and welcome. I'm just going to let the listeners know I've known David about 10 years, and about 8 years ago, when my dad was passing from lung cancer that went to his brain, I was very confused about the things that were happening and the experiences that I was happening and different things that had gone out in my life. And then someone referred me to Dave Bennett, said, go see Dave Bennett, go to a near death experience group, talk to him. And then I did. And David was so kind to share with me what was going on, some confusion, some feelings and emotions that were coming up. So, my first question that I'd like David to share and explain with the listeners is about a near death experience or a spiritual experience. What exactly is that?
Well, it's kind of a broad range of experiences. Actually, we like to kind of put them into one name. Let's just give it one name. We call it spiritually transformative experiences. So a near-death experience would be that, and a near-death experience is where you've come close to death or have experienced death but have been brought back, like in a cardiac arrest, and then you're resuscitated and you come back. During those episodes, many times, experiencers, and I like to call everybody just experiencers because we've all had some form of spiritually transformative experience, they experience sometimes otherworldly, out of body type of experiences. But this also includes, besides near death experiences, you can also have like Kundalini experiences, spontaneous spiritual awakenings, exceptional human experiences. All of these are names for different types of spiritually transformative experiences. And what happens is after an experiencer has an experience like this, then they have to learn how to live with it. And so that's where a lot of the challenges come for experiencers. Within the experience itself, there may be elements that are confusing. Maybe they don't have a relationship to in this lifetime. That was certainly the case in my experience because I was an engineer and then suddenly I was thrust into this otherworldly experience and it rocked my world and I didn't know how to deal with it. So, it's the neat thing about these experiences, though, is it changes a person for the better. Even if they have a distressing type of experience. Some experiences can be dark and distressing. Um, about 17 to about 20% of experiences can be distressing. But the neat thing is everyone who's even had a distressing experience has come out of it with something.
That's perfect. And that leads me to my next question because we are working with the shadow self and encouraging the listeners and our clientele and people who reach out to us that shadow self is still a part of you and deserves unconditional love. It deserves your attention, it deserves your worth. So I'd like you to elaborate on that the darkness part or even though you come out through the light, the confusion or what you feel, if you would elaborate a little bit on that as how it associates to the shadow self.
Yeah, well, I can tell you about in my personal experience. I don't like to share other people's experiences um, online, but my experience was I drowned off the California coast in 1983. And in that experience, I first went into darkness, actually, a literal void of absolute nothing. And but it felt like there was more to it. And many experiencers who experience like a void type of experience find that incredibly distressing. But I had just died quite violently in 30-foot seas, so to me the void was very comforting. But what I found, I would say, my shadow self, is when we pass on, we still have our character with us, and the death has is kind of a process. We actually go through different stages in dying where we it allows us to leave behind the earthly ego and emotions and all of that we live with on a day-to-day basis, but we no longer need once we've shed this body. And so when I got to the other side, I had all of my judgments, I had all of my my criticisms, and all of that was with me. And so when I went, especially through my life review, and I was experiencing my life, you can imagine I was kind of judging my own life. The neat thing was is there was so much divine love in that experience from my soul family and from the light itself, and that I call God, that I was the one that was doing the judging, not so much them. They were loving me, supporting me, and allowing me to learn through this experience. So I would have to say that that was probably would be what I would call where I had to deal with my shadow self, was because I was ashamed of some of the things that I had done in my life. And now here my soul family is experiencing and witnessing my life. And you can imagine how humbling that could be.
That's I so can, and it's so true, and it is very humbling. And I love the way that you said that you were the one who was judging yourself, because that is what we're trying to teach people is we always say, well, this person's seeing me like this, or this person thinks this, or this person put this label on me. When none of that really matters. It's you yourself that's making the judgment on yourself. All we're responsible is for our own actions, our own characters. So I love how you said that. You were the one who was judging yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. In life, we do tend to worry and be all concerned about our appearance, what people think of us, how our family react to us. And the funny thing is when you really boil it down, because I do a lot of coaching, when people really look at a situation and take it apart, you find out that the other people really aren't all that concerned about you or your circumstances because they're self-involved in their own stuff. So for us to be judging or worried, so worried about what other people are thinking or saying about us. I have a lot of exposure because I've been on radio and television and have had a lot of exposure, and I have had people attack me publicly. Verbal attacks. I'm not talking physical attacks, but verbally attack and actually make up stories and stuff about me. But the neat thing is I don't have to engage in that, and I don't have to take on their stuff when they do criticize or come after me. So I just let it go. I can release that really easy because they have their own stuff, and I must have triggered something in their life that has caused that reaction.
That's a very good point.
And that's perfect. That leads me into the next question because you used the key words. Everybody triggers something in somebody else. So it's not necessarily us, it's a trigger in the other person that needs to work something in their life characteristic shadow self. And because we've triggered that, in them, would you say that's what engages them to be irate or lash out, or um, that they saw something they didn't like, or we triggered something? Would you say that that's what?
Yeah, I would. I would say many times, but sometimes a cigar is a cigar. Sometimes we've offended someone too. But
Right.
you know, but but um, but also, but that's where discernment comes in. That's where you have to take a breath. And when someone's irate with you, don't just respond. You need to take a breath. Like when I had people accusing me of things, making stuff up about me. I mean, my first reaction was, "Oh man, I got angry," and I wanted to tell them how wrong they were. But then I realized, some of my own advice, took some of my own advice and and took a breath, and I realized, I really don't have to engage in this because it's so far fetched that anybody who really knows me knows that this is, just a fabrication. So yeah, I mean, be careful. We do offend sometimes unintentionally, but in those circumstances, it's easy to identify. Okay, I stepped on their toes, I encroached in their space, or something like that, and back off and apologize. There's nothing wrong with apologizing.
Very well said. Todd, do you want to have a?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you brought up, David, about the fact that you have to take a breath. It's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily mean that it's about us or directed toward us, but it's obviously something that's triggered in them. And, when you feed into the energy, that's just going to make it worse. So it's just better to step back and just let it be and take a breath. I think that's a very wise piece of advice.
And when you do come out of these situations, like you said, when you came out, I know that you've had more than one experience because I've read your book and I have multiple books by you. Um, you have had more than one. And so when you come out, you explain that there is confusion or disorientation, and it's not always immediate that you're humble and kind and at the light. It takes a while for your body to readjust earthly and to figure out what happened. Is that correct?
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the research actually shows that there is a integration process, and for most, especially profound experiences, it can be anywhere from 7 to 14 years for the initial integration. But people that have had profound near-death experiences, like myself, the integration is actually lifelong. It doesn't end.
Okay.
But the really intense part of the integration is that initial 7 to 14 years. So, and it depends on a lot of factors too, because um, if you're in a supportive environment that supports that you've had this experience, integration can be a lot quicker. If you're in an environment that doesn't support this type of experience, people are telling you that it was a dream, it was a hallucination, they're discounting it totally, then then it's going to take longer to integrate because you're not going to have that support system. And what you need in any of these experiences is some sort of support system where you can talk to other people that have had similar types of experiences and know that you're not alone. That's part of the problem is in this life we're under that false assumption that we're separate individuals from everyone else when we're not. We're in reality, we're interconnected with everyone, but we don't realize that because of the way we live this physical reality. So many of the challenges that experiencers have when they come back are, well, first, who do you tell this to? Who do you trust? Who do you trust enough that you can tell this to that won't have a bad reaction? And then how do you talk about things that aren't from this world? You don't have a vocabulary for it, so you have to kind of build a vocabulary for it, and these things take time. And then if you do get a bad reaction, how do you deal with that? Okay, so um, which and these are things that just happen, and then you have to deal with a new shift in reality. So you were living your life, suddenly you have an experience that challenges, many times it challenges your belief systems, and now you have to come to terms with this new sense of reality, this new worldview. And, how do you deal with that? Many times it comes with gifts. Sometimes people have intuitive gifts, healing gifts. Sometimes a lot of sensitivities. Many people come back and they're very sensitive to medication, to light, to sound, things like that. And so those are real physical elements that you have to sometimes deal with. Of course, if it was a near-death experience, there may be health issues that are related to the death. And so then you've got that compounding the integration of the experience itself. So you can see it's a multifaceted, and it's not the same. Each experiencer has to kind of find their own little path. And some of the challenges, other challenges that we have that really kind of irk me a little bit still to this day, because I'm pretty peaceful kind of guy. But what is when someone hijacks another person's experience, and that's where, like, okay, so I've had this experience and I share it with someone, and then suddenly they're telling me, oh, this is what you had and this is what you need to do, type of thing. It's really not the best thing for an experiencer to have to face that, especially when it's family members. Family members love us and they care deeply for us and they want the best for us. But a lot of times they'll hijack our own experience and kind of send us down the wrong path. It's really up to the experiencer to find their path.
And that's where I'll again refer the listeners to myself. I've worked with David, and he's amazing. And when I met him, didn't know that I had had these experiences until I did a workshop and a lecture with you. And then you drew me out of the crowd, which was really funny. And you sat and you talked to me, and mine was as young as 4, my very first one. So I had no clue and I did not understand it because I was 4 years old, and I tried to explain it to my mother and my father. My mother, very Catholic Irish woman, don't repeat that, don't share that. And then again, I had one when I was 15, and then again at 19. And then my most recent was 20 years ago with the birth of my daughter. And you so gently explained that to me, that what they were, and they were these experiences, and that I chose to come back. I chose to be here so people see me differently. Like, I've had the attacks like you where people say, well, you just can't be that nice. Why are you that friendly? Well, because I work from heart center. I've been there and back. So when you say that, I understand. And the most recent traumatic was the birth of my daughter. So when you say it can take 7 to 14 years, I get that because she's 20 and I just feel like I'm settling from that. So I really like the way you explain that to the listeners. Take your time and let it be your own decisions, your own making of your experience.
Yeah, because it is going to change your life. It's going to change your life eventually for the better, but there will be challenges you'll have to overcome. Challenges like suddenly you don't have as much of a materialistic desire in your life. Well, you can imagine how challenging that could be to your family who are used to you being the breadwinner. Um, also, like one of a big challenge for me was I wanted to love everything. I love the kitchen table as much as I love my wife. It put a little bit of a kink in our relationship. So things, just some of the after effects of these experiences can really put a crimp, and like then you want to go to work. You want to work in a job that's rewarding, that feels fulfilling, that feels like you're going to be of service of some way to give back to humanity. And then you find out that your boss is a jerk, and you can't stand him, and it's like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. So suddenly you're changing roles, you're changing, your whole life around just so that you can be of service, so that you can give something back. It's or you find out that the company you work for is really just an eco disaster type of they just don't care for the earth at all or something like that, and it just drives you crazy. But you brought up a good point, because you had early childhood experiences, and childhood experiences are even different than adult experiencers. Childhood experiencers tend to accept the experience immediately for what it is. It because it's simple, it's efficient, it's just the way it should be. But then they find out that the world doesn't really work that way.
Exactly.
And so then you have, so then a child has to go through not feeling like they're not fitting in because they know how it's supposed to work, but it doesn't work that way. And so they tend to have a lost period of that seeking. And meanwhile, the adults are telling them stuff that just doesn't mesh with the way they feel or the way that they want to live their life. So childhood, whereas adults, on the other hand, have lived in this world, have lived, have hammered out a living in some way or another, and then suddenly they have this experience, and now it totally rocks their world, and so they have to come at it from a slightly different perspective.
That I can totally understand it. And I think some kids nowadays in this generation, that they're very gifted. They're coming in as crystal children, they're coming in as indigo children, they're coming in with gifts, and they already feel that before they, as they're growing up, like, hey, this world really is not what I was told it was going to be, but they're coming in anyways. So I see that on both sides of the scale, that we have a lot of work to do, but we have people that are ready to do the work. If we can all collaboratively come together as one, we can get there.
Yeah, and the great thing about the new kids is that it shows that as a species we are evolving, and that we do have some bright potential ahead of us. A lot of times we get so caught up in all the day to day doom and gloom that we see, bombarding us in all the media, that we forget that there are a lot, and because I talk to people all around the world now, and I see a lot of hope for humanity because I see that everybody is searching. Not everybody, but the most people, I would say a high percentage of people are searching. They're searching to live in a more spiritual, in a more heart-centered type of way of living. They want more meaning in their life. They don't want to just, be a zombie, go to work, come home, watch TV. They don't want that. Um, they really do want something more meaningful, that gives them a sense of purpose. And without a sense of purpose, it makes life pretty unbearable.
And with that, would you say that's why more people are coming forward with the shadow work and the shadow self work, and they're ready and prepared for it? Like they're really reaching out to Todd and I, and we've had like we haven't put anything out, but they find us. It's like I'm ready. I want to do this. Would you think that that's why? Because we are evolving. The world is evolving, so they're ready to really look at themselves and look at things as a whole.
Oh yeah, the minute I mean, it doesn't take a lot to have suddenly have a following nowadays because we have such great tools through the internet to be able to search and find people and find solutions. So it frees people up to be able to search out and find the things, the tools that they need in order for them to grow. And we see it especially in countries that aren't struggling quite so much. If you're living a life in a war torn area, and I mean, your whole focus is on survival. You don't have time to work on the higher realms of life. So in those areas, you see a kind of almost like a veil in those areas a lot of times. But then, but people are poking, they're like just below the surface and they're just percolating through that veil, in order to try to reach out. They may not have all the tools that we have available to us, but then, but they're searching. And it amazes me sometimes, some of the people and some of the stories that I've heard and that sort of thing. But then in developed countries where we're not facing, where's my next meal coming from? We're not in survival mode. Then we have the ability, and we want more. We want more, and that's the neat thing that I'm seeing more and more and more is people from all walks of life. And I mean, I don't care what belief system you come from. I don't care what your nationality or anything like that is. People want to find that purpose in life.
Beautiful. Todd?
That's so true. That's very true. I'm glad you brought that up, David. I do have a question for you. For listeners who are listening to this episode tonight and who may have had a near-death experience but really not talked to many people about it, is there a community that they could connect up with, maybe on the internet or something like that they could connect with to maybe open up more about their near-death experience?
Yeah, wow, so many communities out there. There's one organization that has a conference every year that's IANDS, IANDS, and there are many groups around, and many local groups in all around the world. Actually, they have groups all around the world, and they're the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Now, they've been researching near-death experiences for over 30 years. There's another organization that is helping people. It's called Assist, ACISTE. And what Assist is doing is they're creating certification programs for people that are life coaches, spiritual counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, nurses, doctors that are they're kind of like the first responders for people like that have had spiritually transformative experiences. And ASSIST is the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. And if you go to assist.com or ians.com, you can find out all you want about those two organizations. But also, if you want to just reach out to other experiencers and to just have an open communication, there are so many Facebook groups. Just put in NDE and man, you're going to find dozens of online groups. But the same thing with Google Plus, even in like Pinterest and some of these places, you're going to find that there are people or any type of, like say out of body experiences. You had an out of body experience, you want to know more about it, but there was a spiritual element to it. You can just go into Facebook and you'll find groups that are talking about it. And so there's a lot available. But those two groups, I know personally because I've been involved with, I've been on the board of Assist, and also I've run IANS groups, and I'm on the board for the IANS group down here in Virginia Beach right now.
Well, thank you for sharing that information. I'm sure the listeners will really, take advantage and look into those communities.
You've shared a lot, but if for the listeners who have dealt with some of this in the shadow self and the near death experience and transformational experiences, what would be your most positive advice for them to go forward? Like, what would be a positive incentive or encouragement that you would give them?
Oh man, I could talk about that for a whole nother hour.
Okay, good.
No, the thing is to be gentle with yourself. Don't jump on the judgment train, because it's so easy you're gonna at first when you come back from one of these experiences, you're still the same person. So you're going to have still the same buttons that people can push are still going to be able to push those buttons on you, And so it takes time and patience. I would recommend, finding a spiritual practice that feels good to you. Meditation is always one of the foundations of any good spiritual practice. But I like to also include gratitude, because when you step into gratitude, you step outside of yourself. You give control away from yourself when you're feeling a sense of gratitude. And another thing I like to advise people is try to develop a sense of wonder, because when you're in a sense of wonder, you become an explorer. You're exploring now for the truth. And so, in looking for the truth, we're open to all possibilities. And so living in a state of wonder is an excellent way to explore this new reality that you've been exposed to and to be able to seek out. Don't be afraid to be that voracious person in the library that's reading every book that has love in the title. That used to be me. Don't be afraid to go there. Live in that sense of wonder and become that explorer of your own personal journey.
Almost like a kid, like a kid again, like a young.
Yeah. Yeah. Let that inner child out. Let them play. Let them dance. And that's another thing too, is there's so many ways to explore this experience. Because look towards your inspiration. What do you find that inspires you? I've got a friend here, a new friend that I've met down here in Virginia Beach, and she loves numbers. Numbers are her thing, and so so for her, to get into mathematics and stuff like that, that is like, that's like heaven for her. God bless. I couldn't do it. And I'm an engineer. I mean, God, I could, I can swing the bat pretty good. But the thing is find what your inspiration is, because once you start working with inspiration, you're working with spirit communication. Because where does inspiration come from? Our higher consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to work with your inspiration, use that as a vehicle to move forward, and to help generate that sense of wonder.
We had a guest on our previous show who his is music, and he was sharing with the listeners to use music. He uses music as his inspiration, and Todd was sharing that like Todd is really into crystals and singing bowls, and I'm into oils, and um, so I really understand that. Find that thing. It might not be yoga, it might not be meditation, it might be something else, and that's okay. Find what resonates with you personally, is what I'm hearing you say to the listeners.
Oh yeah, so true. I love to go out, and I have a wood shop here in my house, and man, that's where the inspiration just flows with me. In fact, I can't churn it out fast enough.
It's just great creativity to do that.
Yeah.
A great outlet. David, would you like to talk a little bit about your book? If the listeners wanted to, seek out your book, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the first book I wrote talks about my near-death experience and the path that I ended up going on, and the journey that it took me on to, through integration. But it kind of also talks about my journey through my integration, but also how my near-death experience helped me to overcome stage 4 lung and bone cancer. And so that's the last third of the book, because I go through two near-death experiences in the book, but besides the cancer. So, cancer should have been strike 3 for me, but anyway, it wasn't. I'm still here. I have more work to do. But the name of that book is Voyage of Purpose. It's spiritual wisdom from near death back to life, and it's published by Findhorn Press, it's an imprint of Inner Traditions, pretty big publishing house. And then the other book is A Voice as Old as Time, and the subtitle is Contemplation for Spiritual Transformation. This book is kind of near and dear to me because after my cancer, I started. I had to, because in my lung cancer ate away part of my spine collapsed. So there was a lot of pain in my life. Talk about a shadow side. And so in order to overcome that constant pain, Spirit showed me how to use mindfulness. And my morning meditation practice, I would have a communication with Spirit. Well, that continues to this day. And that was in 2000 when I was diagnosed with cancer. And so it's been, many years, 17 plus years. I've used a different type of meditation. It's a little unique. It's called contemplation meditation, where I go into a meditative state, but then I have communion with spirit, and we discuss topics. And so every morning, what I do is I take what I have communed with spirit and I write it down, and I put that out on Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus, and Pinterest, and all these places. And I put these reflections out there. And well, after many years of doing that, Spirit kind of said, you really should take, the cream of the crop and put it into a book. So that's what Voice as Old as Time really is, because it's really the voice of the universe speaking to me and telling me great little subjects. So I broke that one up into 44 different chapters, and each chapter deals with an element in spiritual development, spiritual maturity. So, you go through tolerance, acceptance, tolerance, harmony, and, meditation, stillness, self-love, things like that. And so it's a nice way to read just a segment of it and just sit with it and allow it to be a theme for your day. And many people who have read the book have talked back to me and said that, it's interesting. I'll take just kind of, I needed to work on, this chapter. And while I was reading that, I kind of adopted that as my mantra for the day. And gosh, things just started synchronistically happening and crossing my path, and that were right in tune with that. Or I would run into other people that needed to hear exactly what I had read out of your book this morning, that sort of thing. So it's kind of interesting once you talk and you have a desire, an actual intention, a pure intention that you put out to the universe that you want to work on yourself, the universe starts lining things up so that people are going to cross your path, situations are going to be brought about in your life to actually work on the stuff that you want to work on. So that's kind of I wrote that book with a lot of archetypical type of patterns in it. So it's a lot of work went into that book.
I think that's the next book on my queue. That sounds fascinating. So I think I will be purchasing that. So are those books available on Amazon, David, or how might they be able to get the book?
Yes, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any online book source can get that book.
Great. I'll have that in the show notes, so people can find it on Amazon. I'll have the link right there, so they can click and order the book if they'd like. So if the listeners wanted to reach out to you, David, how might they do that?
The best way is to come through my website. It's kind of my portal. If you go to dharmatalks.com, it talks about my services and things like that. But if you look up at the very top header, you'll find links to my Facebook pages, Twitter pages, Google, YouTube, all of those things. And then you can also message me through that, or go to Facebook. If you're on Facebook, you can, go into Messenger and message me, that sort of thing.
Great. I'll have all that information in the show notes as well for the listeners. Joanne, do you have any other questions?
I don't think so. I think that we've covered all the topics, and you've worded everything so beautifully, and it's a pleasure that you were on and took the time with us today. And do you have any words of wisdom for the listeners, David?
Oh boy. Well, I mentioned earlier that we kind of live in an illusion of feeling separate, like we're living as separate individuals, when the absolute truth is we're not. We're interconnected, but the connection that we all share is love. That's the one thing that I hear from most experiencers was I felt this most profound love while on the other side. And that love is what interconnects all of us. And you don't have to go searching for it because it's right there inside each and every one of us. And all we have to do is just learn how to connect with that inner divine love that exists within each and every one of us. And when we do, it's like turning a key in a lock and opening a door to a new world of possibility. Because one thing that I've seen looking into future self is that all the potentials are available to each and every one of us. It's just up to us to set a loving intention with pure reality, and the universe immediately starts aligning those possibilities for each and every one of us.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. I would love to talk more about this. We'll have to have you on again, David, if you're willing to do that.
I'd love to. Be great.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much for your time tonight. We really enjoyed it. We're very honored. And so that's a wrap, everybody. Until next time, everyone have a great night.
Thank you. Till next time. Thank you again, David.
Thanks for having me.